Hi folks, today we're going to go through setting up your canvas for your first cut. So whether you've just bought a Silhouette machine and you've just taken it out of the box, or you're coming over from a Cricut and you've never used the Silhouette software before, this is going to go through and show you how to set up your canvas for cutting a project. I am using business edition of the Silhouette Studio software. All these things that I'm talking about today will be the same for business or designer edition. This is just basic setup. The version of the software that I'm using will be linked down below. The first thing you want to do is go File and New. So this will start up a new project for you. The other option is to just click on this little plus, and that again starts up a new project. You can have obviously as many tabs open as you like. However, be aware that the more tabs you do have open, the slower your program can run. So I like to just work on a few tabs at once, but it is handy to be able to have multiple open to copy and paste between canvases, things like that. So the first thing you're going to want to do is come over to the page setup menu. So this is over on the right hand side, first icon. The first thing you're going to want to do is select your machine. If you have a machine already plugged in, it should detect it and will give you an auto option. I'm using a Silhouette portrait today, but I will be pretending I'm using a Cameo because I know that's what most people tend to use. So just make sure you have the correct machine set for what you want to cut with. The next thing you're going to do is select your cutting mat. So with or without a cutting mat, this is where you would select it. You've got the 12-inch, the 12 by 24-inch, the portrait mat, and then some of the other options. You can also select auto. Again, I like to just select the one that I'm working on because I'm not always designing with a machine plugged in. Sometimes I'm designing on my laptop on the couch. So I just want to make sure these settings are correct. You can then reveal as much of your mat as you like. I like to have just full white, and you can turn grid lines on and off later. The next thing you want to do is select your media size. So this is the size of the material that you're going to be cutting. So often vinyl will come in 12 by 12 sheets, but sometimes vinyl comes in letter size sheets, or if you're cutting cardstock, it often comes in letter size or A4 size. And then you can also do a custom size. So just click on custom and say I wanted to cut on maybe I had a 20 centimeter piece of vinyl left over by 10 centimeters. And so that would be my 20 by 10 centimeter piece of vinyl. But today we're just going to set it on 12 by 12, pretending we're cutting out a piece of vinyl. The other thing you can do is rotate. Obviously with a 12 by 12, it's not going to make too much difference, but this does show you where the arrow is how you load the material in. So if you're designing up here, but your arrow is down on the bottom, you're going to be cutting on the bottom of your vinyl. So make sure that your arrow is pointing up. Some people also like to design like this, showing the material feeding into the machine to the left. I like having the arrow at the top. The other things you have down here are your print and cut borders. So sometimes people have this gray line turned on and they're a bit worried because they think they can't cut outside that line. That's just a print border. So if you're printing on an inkjet or a laser printer, this is the maximum that my inkjet printer can print. It's a pretty standard office printer, so it's A4 size, and it can't print 12 by 12. So that would be the maximum size I could print on my printer. But today we're just doing a cut project, so you can just turn that off. It's a good idea to keep your cut border on. With a 12 by 12 on a mat, your cut border is basically edge to edge. But if you're using no mat, you'll notice that the cut border comes in a little bit. And that's because the machine needs a tiny bit of vinyl to hold on to under the rollers. So if you were trying to cut all the way to the edge, your vinyl would actually be spat out the back of the machine. So you do lose a little bit of cutting room if you don't use a mat. So it's a good idea to keep your cut border on. Today we're going to use a mat, so I'm going to put it back to cutting mat. The other thing you can do is make sure that your registration marks, which is the third icon along, make sure that they're turned off. So you would only have them on if you're going to print on an inkjet or laser printer first. If you're just cutting out of vinyl, you want to make sure they're off. If you've accidentally turned them on, the machine is going to look for these printed marks, and of course, unless you printed them, they're not going to be there. So make sure they're off for a cut project. I'll do a follow-up video to go through creating your first project, but the other thing you want to do at this point is probably think about how you're going to cut. And by that, I mean, when you go to your send panel, are you going to select your cut lines as you go? Are you going to cut by lines, color, fill color, or layers? I'm always going to be cutting by line, and I'll show you why. The line color option lets you choose to cut specific line colors. So I've got another project here already open to show you what I mean by that. So here we have 3 different objects. We have, or multiple different objects. I'm just going to group these together. So we have a donut with a circle on top. We have some green text, and we have a donut with a circle, but they've been welded together. So if I go to my send panel and I use my simple, and it will only show me for my portrait size machine, which is currently plugged in. So I'm just going to make this all a bit smaller so I can show you what I'm talking about. So if I use the simple cut, which a lot of people do, you can select your shape and you can choose it to not cut, cut, or cut edge. I find this a bit complicated when I'm designing because I never know exactly what it's going to choose to cut. I'm sure there are people that do it like this. I just find it a bit more complex. What I like to do instead is go to the line panel, and then I can choose to turn on and off specific colors. So I could cut just my red objects, and I could select those to cut from glitter cardstock, and I could select my green to also cut from glitter cardstock, whatever you wanted to do there. But also you can see that this is going to cut out every red line, regardless of whether it overlaps or not. So we've got 2 overlapping red lines here. It's going to cut them both out. So when I'm looking at this, I really know exactly where it's going to cut, and I'm not confused about any overlap or what may or may not cut. So that's my favorite way of designing. So in this case, if I knew I didn't want to cut these inside bits, I would have to do something to this object, for example, weld it, so that I've got an outside cut line. So that's how I'm always going to teach to cut, is to cut by line color, so that you can really clearly see when you're designing that everything that's red will be cut out, or in this case, green as well. It also means you can use design, you can use shapes that maybe you want to make sure that your specific shape is going to fit around existing text or something like that. So you can put that there, you can leave it there, and you can know that when you go to the send panel, you just turn it off because you don't want it to cut. So that's it for now. That's just setting up your page ready for cutting. I'm going to do a follow-up video, so make sure to read the description for the follow-up video on cutting your first project. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a lovely day. Leave any questions, comments down below, and see you in the next one. Bye!